This is your WCFW Daily News Roundup for 105.7 CFW in Chippewa Falls and 93.5 The Tap in Eau Claire.
For 105.7 CFW News, I'm James Kelly. Democratic state lawmakers have introduced new legislation to increase the reimbursement rate for special education in public schools. Under the new biennial budget, the reimbursement rate for special education was set at 45%. Last month, however, the Department of Public Instruction notified schools the rate would decrease to 35% with higher than expected cost increases for those services. State Representative Christian Phelps is a member of the Assembly Committee on Education. He says that because schools are constitutionally required to provide special education services, local taxpayers could be on the hook for the increased cost.
It is a constitutional requirement in Wisconsin that we provide an education, a free and basic education, as uniform as practicable to every kid in the state. But the details of how that happens are that if the state doesn't carry enough weight, a lot of the weight on fulfilling that constitutional requirement falls on individual people and their local property taxes.
Representative Phelps says the state originally reimbursed public schools for about 70% of their special education costs. Over the last decade, however, that reimbursement rate has dropped to about one-third of special education costs, putting more of the financial burden on taxpayers. At the same time, private and parochial schools that participate in the Special Needs Voucher Program are getting nearly all of those costs reimbursed.
But we have this statewide Special Needs Voucher Program that is only 1 decade old. And even though private and parochial schools, even the ones that take public funds, are not required to even admit students with disabilities, if they choose to participate in the Special Needs Voucher Program, the state will fund 90% or more of their special education costs.
If passed into law, the proposed legislation would guarantee public schools receive the 45% reimbursement rate despite the increased cost of providing special education services. A new report released by the Wisconsin Hospital Association this week found that the state's hospitals and health systems provided around $2.2 billion in community benefits in 2024. The community benefits cover things like charity care, subsidized services, education initiatives, research, and other public programs. The report also found that about a quarter of Wisconsin hospitals operated with negative margins in 2024, largely due to inadequate Medicaid reimbursements, rising costs, and persistent healthcare workforce shortages. According to the report, nearly $57 million of those community benefits went to the West Central Wisconsin region in 2024. The region covers from Eau Claire, Chippewa, and Trumbull counties west to Polk, St. Croix, and Pierce counties. The hospitals and health systems in the region include Mayo Clinic Health System locations in Eau Claire and Red Cedar, Marshfield Medical Center locations in Eau Claire and Rice Lake, Western Wisconsin Health in Baldwin, Aspirus Stanley Hospital in Stanley, and St. Croix Health in St. Croix Falls. The Department of Housing and Urban Development has temporarily withdrawn a plan that would limit funding for homeless prevention. Wisconsin previously joined a multi-state lawsuit to block the changes, leading the department to pull back on the plan prior to a court hearing on Monday to make technical corrections. The lawsuit targets changes to the agency's Continuum of Care program, which would cap permanent housing program funding at 30% compared to the current 90% cap, and require providers to overhaul their programs beginning in January. A number of Western Wisconsin organizations participate in the Continuum of Care program, including the Dairyland Coalition, West Central Coalition, and Cooley Coalition. State officials say the changes would force the cancellation of thousands of projects aimed at reducing homelessness and leave local organizations little time to develop alternative plans. Western Wisconsin has seen a growing unhoused population over recent years, and multiple local governments have identified affordable housing as a significant long-term need. Wisconsin Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez visited Eau Claire this week, taking part in a roundtable discussion on affordability with staff members at the community table. Lieutenant Governor Rodriguez highlighted the critical work being done by organizations like the Community Table, which provides free meals to people in need in the Chippewa Valley. Officials from the nonprofit say the demand for their services has increased over the last year, especially when food share benefits were delayed due to the federal government shutdown. Another candidate has entered the Democratic primary field for governor in the 2026 election. Joel Brennan officially announced his campaign on Thursday, joining a crowded field of candidates, including current Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez, State Senator Kelda Royce, former Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, and State Representative Francesca Hong. Brennan highlighted some of his previous roles in his campaign announcement, including as Secretary of the Department of Administration during the COVID-19 pandemic and Executive Director of Discovery World, as well as his current role as President of the Greater Milwaukee Committee. The Augusta Community Cupboard is looking for community support as it collects food donations throughout the holiday season. According to organization officials, the food donations are being collected under 3 decorated trees at Augusta City Hall. They're asking for donations of non-perishable food items under the trees through the end of December. Residents can also make monetary donations, which can be left with the city clerk during business hours or placed in the night drop. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources is sharing some recycling tips for the holiday season. According to a press release, the gift giving that comes with the holiday season also comes with an increase in things being thrown in the usual trash that don't belong there. DNR officials are reminding residents that items like cardboard, aluminum cans, and glass bottles can always be recycled anywhere in the state. Things like electronics, batteries, or holiday light strings, however, could cause issues at typical recycling facilities and should be brought to special drop-off sites instead. For 105.7 CFW News, I'm James Kelly.
A win for the Bucks. Hi, I'm Mike Clemens with sports. NBA, the Bucks with a much-needed victory, 116-101 over the Boston Celtics at Fiserv Forum. Milwaukee's Kyle Kuzma with a season-high 31 points. Doc Rivers says the adjustments they worked on in practice this week leading up to the game worked.
One of the things we talked to you guys about going in the break was correcting our spacing. I thought we had room tonight. Guys wasn't in the wrong spots. When a guard drove, he knew where the other guy was at. I thought we played a very organized basketball game tonight.
NFL, the Packers fly to Denver tomorrow to play the Broncos Sunday afternoon at 3:25. Denver tied for first place in the AFC with a record of 11-2. How has Denver been able to win so many close games with a young quarterback like Bo Nix?
9 of the 11 games, they've come back in the fourth quarter, and so I think that obviously, deservingly so, he gets a ton of credit for that. And then the defense and special teams, I mean, it's a really good football team.
That's Packers head coach Matt LaFleur with Sports on Mike Clemens.
Chippewa Valley weather.
Cloudy with a little light snow today, less than a half inch of accumulation. With falling temperatures, we are going to drop into the single digits by late this afternoon into this evening. Tonight, mostly cloudy. We're going to drop to near 10 below zero. It'll be windy. And then tomorrow, sunny and cold with a high of only 1 below zero. I'm meteorologist Sean Cable. The temperature now is 0.
That's your WCFW and the TAP Daily News Roundup from Civic Media. Subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you find your podcasts. Find more news at WCFW.FM or thetap.fm.